I want to ask you about your perspective on the actual virus to get started, just and then your input astrology-wise also.
Okay. I believe that what's going on is an occult ritual happening on the world stage to usher in the new age. Around 2012, we had the whole Mayan calendar thing telling us about we're entering a new age. That is going to commence this year on December 21st, 2020. We are going into a triple conjunction on that day, on the winter solstice, on a solar eclipse at 0 degrees of Aquarius. That means we're ushering in the age of Aquarius. We're going from the Piscean age to the Aquarian age. And so Pisces was a water sign. 3,000 years ago, that was biblical floods. Fast forward to today, we're entering into the Aquarian age, which is an air sign. Air is communication, it's technology, it's nanotechnology, it's
fires,
viruses, it's quantum computing, it's genetic engineering. So it's all this very sophisticated technology as we enter the new age. Or you could say that we were in the Kali Yuga, the Iron Age, ushering into the Bronze Age. So as we get into the Bronze Age, that ties into what metal? Copper. Copper is what? Bronze is 90% copper, 10% tin. Tin has always been the metal of the liver, and that's where copper is processed in the liver. So now we're in the Bronze Age. Copper will be the leading lady in this new epoch, and that's why the spotlight has to be put on her. Did that make sense?
Wow. Okay, I see where this is headed. First of all, I'm going to be writing through this entire thing, taking
Sure.
Excuse me. Let me get some water too. Hold on. This is so good.
Go right ahead.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Talk about starting off with a bang. Okay.
Yeah, and here's another thing. Did you know that Corona, there's a Saint Corona, the patron saint of epidemics and pandemics. So
Stop.
Saint Corona, and then she has a counterpart, Saint Victor, and these are going to be played out. So the Saint Corona Day is May 14th. So be on the lookout for May 14th for the financial collapse of our economic system.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so that's May 14th, which is Saint Corona Day. And she's the patron saint of
epidemics and
pandemics.
And she died at 16. 16 in Theosophical edition is 7. 7 is the crown, is the pineal. And so the pineal is the spiritual connection between the above and the below. It connects our physical to the spiritual aspect. And so Big Brother and Coterie completely understand this. So they have to do everything into the sun to prevent us from getting the download, because these alignments are biblical. They are absolutely amazing, but it's going to open up cosmic coronal energy to flow into our pineal gland to activate our DNA. So Big Brother will take a genetically engineered virus so they can inject it into us to prevent our pineal gland from getting the download of the universe. We're about to evolve, but they will do everything to prevent us from evolving. They have ushered in all the ages, and they are not about to lose control as they usher in the new age. So we live in the most fascinating time. Who has it said that this is, the author that said we live in the greatest times and the worst times? I think that was
The best of times, the worst of times.
Best of times and the worst of times. And that's why this is going to be a phenomenal epoch for us to really evolve. But it's going to be very difficult for a lot of people that are loaded with toxins and kind of goose stepping to the same beat of the mainstream media. We need to have critical think to navigate through this new age, because that pineal gland is calcifying, right? You've heard of the calcifying pineal gland?
Absolutely.
So this is where mineral balancing comes into the show, because our whole goal with mineral balancing is to bring calcium, which is Saturn. Saturn is death, darkness, aging, father time, order, and structure. And so that's always the death of us. So we have to prevent calcium from precipitating out of solution, because then when it precipitates out of solution, that's all your calcium deposition diseases. Atherosclerosis, hardening of the brains, the gallstones, the kidney stones, the cataracts, the joint rot, all is a calcification, because that's Saturn's return. That's the Grim Reaper, Saturn coming to take, which will get us all in the end. But our goal is to slow down premature aging, and that's why mineral balancing is critical, because who modulates calcium? Magnesium, sodium, and potassium keep calcium in solution. And when that calcium goes out of solution, that is all your deposition diseases. And that's why when we look at this, the metals become so important, because the metals are part of how these genetic engineered viruses get activated. So they get activated through the electromagnetic frequencies that stimulate the metals, that the metals will turn the protein on the virus to activate whatever sequence of the virus is to wreak its destruction on us. So that's why we have to understand the electromagnetic fields, we have to understand the metals, and we have to understand the minerals, and we have to tie it into the cosmological cycles of the great time. So we know that we have 4 great cycles. We have the Golden Age, we have the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age. So we're on the cusp of leaving the Iron Age, entering into the Bronze Age, and that Bronze Age is where this is happening on December 21st, 2020, as we enter the Aquarian Age.
So we just went gold, silver, iron, bronze, entering into the Bronze Age. Okay.
Right. And we've been in the Iron Age for the last 3,000 years. So iron is the metal of Mars. So Mars is, we know iron is what makes our steel. That's our you know, all the tanks and the swords and all the weapons of mass destruction.
Right, the god of war.
So Mars is iron. So on Tuesdays, Tuesday has always been the planet of Mars. So Monday is the moon, Tuesday is Mars, Wednesday is Mercury, Thursday is Jupiter. Why do we love Fridays? Because it's Venus. Saturday is Saturn, Sunday is the sun. That's the Magnificent Seven. That Magnificent Seven is the 7 visible orbs to the naked eye. That's the 7 chakras, the 7 days in the week, the 7 colors in the rainbow, the 7 endocrine glands, the 7 layers of skin. What's God's favorite number? 7, because the world was created in 7 days.
You're blowing my mind right now.
And so the 7 is a 3-4 harmonics. The 3 and the 4 is, in astrology, you got fire, water, air, earth in the 3 modes: cardinal, fixed, mutable. Everything is a 3-4 harmonics. On my hand, I have 4 fingers, 3 joints, 3-4 harmonics. Even on a clock, you have 12, 6, 3, and 9, the 4 cardinal points. Then you have the second hand, the minute hand, and the hour hand, 3-4 harmonics. And that gives you the 12. The 12 constellations that influence the 12 meridians that light up the 12 cranial nerves that light up the 12 organ systems. Jesus had 12 apostles. We have 12 months in a calendar year. We go through grades 1 through 12. And so we start to see and tie all the alchemy and the science together. And when we create these 2 worlds and see the beauty in it, now we have a real healing modality. We can't leave the alchemical energies out of the equation. then we're just, we're on a mechanicalistic, Newtonian, Machiavellian type of a science. We need to integrate both worlds into it to understand how we can navigate in this new epoch, in this new age. So that's why I always look at the 7, the 12, the 3, 4 harmonics. I hope that made sense.
I mean, it does, and it's a lot for sure, especially because well, I want to back up to the beginning of everything when you said they, right? You used the word they, and you said they are they're going to stop us from the download, from opening our pineal. They are trying to usher in this new epoch of, using these things against us in a way. Who is they? Who would you
That's
say?
a great question, and I'm going to break it down to the hidden hand. It's not the Obamas, the Trumps, and the Oprahs, and all the actors and actresses that they have in front of us.
Small potatoes, right?
Those are the people's champions, the Billy Boy Gates and all of them. So they always have the people's champions. The hidden hand is the one running the show. Who this hidden hand is, my gut intuitive feeling, we have to go offshore and we have to look at this alien connection to this picture. And no one wants to talk about that.
Oh, wait, I do.
Because when you look at the book of Genesis is the book of genetics. And so we have been genetically altered since the beginning of time. And that's, we are an experiment. And now we go through each epoch. We have a chance to evolve because we have free will and predestination. With those two things, we have the chance to create our own destiny. But we're being psychologically manipulated. We're being chemically lobotomized. We're being directed in the wrong way because the mainstream media and the propaganda machine is so powerful that they understand how to influence us. And so this is why, where does the news come from? The North, the East, the West, and the South. That's the news, okay? And so we start to understand how manipulated we've been. And so now we have to master the elements. We have to master fire, water, air, and earth. To do that, then we become the magi. We become the magician when we master the elements. So those that control the elements, they control the earth element by poisoning the earth and destroying the minerals and, the whole list. They control all the elements. So they are the black magicians. And so we have to be the white magicians and practice magic. And when I say magic, I'm not talking hocus pocus, new age, mumbo jumbo,
alchemy,
garbage. I'm talking alchemy at the highest level. And that's why our goal is to master the elements on a physical level, emotional level, and spiritual level. And now we have a real fighting chance of our evolving in this new age.
Wow.
So there's some amazing things going on.
Yeah.
I know I'm jumping all over the place.
I know. I'm following you. And I know a lot of my listeners will too, because I'm always dipping my toe in this and I never really go there. And this is super exciting to me. In fact, I kind of want to let my audience know that, when you and I were talking through the email, it was when you said as above, so below. That was like ding, 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 ding. Like I knew you were going to take us here, which makes me really happy. Okay, so let's talk about application. Like, how do you apply these theories and notions to your daily life, right? Like, you can look at it as a big picture and say, oh, I've got to block the down, I have to open my pineal. But like from a academic day-to-day, how do I apply these things to my life?
My goal as a physician is to help people. So I don't expect my patients to be at the level where I'm at. I just have to get them to eat better and to mineralize their body and to teach them how to detox their bodies.
Yeah.
Because we start with always the basics. So in everyday application, it's like, let's eat better foods. Let's focus on detox. And all roads lead to the liver. And that's why we got to hit those coffee enemas and we have to hit the kidney adrenal complex because, those are the two detox pathways, liver and kidney. So I'm teaching people about the sauna therapies, about dry skin brushing, about how to kill these chronic infections, because this coronavirus, which is the crown, that's no coincidence. So this coronavirus is going to activate all dormant viruses, whether you have Epstein-Barr or herpes viruses or whatever virus you have. It's not just going to hit you with the coronavirus and cause cellular damage and change the DNA. It's activating all these other latent viruses in us, because this is how these things communicate. They're virulent. I mean, they have a sophistication, and these are genetic engineered bioweapons. And this is where the Aquarian age is about communication, technology, geoengineering, and its manipulation. So we have to be as wise as the serpent. And so to do that, we got to get healthy, because my goal in everyday application is always preaching health. So I don't need to go down the conspiracy road if someone's still going to church and doing this and doing that. That's fine. I have no problem with anyone doing anything. But again, my goal is just to teach you how to get healthier, so we have the strength and fortitude and the resiliency to navigate through this crazy period we're going through, because a lot of people will get sick. And I've been going blue in the face, screaming this for 20 years. You got to get healthy. You have to mineralize the body, and you have to detoxify the body, because every disease is a deficiency and a toxicity. If we don't address the deficiencies, we can't deal with the toxicities. If we don't focus on getting these chemicals and metals and radioactive particles out, the nutrients won't come in. So you have to work on both at the same time. And that's my everyday application.
Yeah, mine too. I love that. So, okay, what about, there's something I noticed. Now, the coronavirus arrived here in January in Seattle or whatever, but so many people are talking, including myself, about how, and this for me was in late November or late October, where I felt like I kind of contracted something that is very much, and I haven't had the flu in probably 12 years. I haven't, not since I've been married. I've never had the flu ever since I've been married, in 12 years, 13 years, 14, 15, probably a good 15 or 20 years that I even remember ever getting the flu. But at the end of October, I felt exactly these exact symptoms of corona. And I knew so many people that were also, and a lot of these people, we were blaming it on the fires in Los Angeles. And so that was one thing. But then right after that, and I couldn't breathe, I was laying on the sofa, just not able to breathe. It was pretty scary for a little bit. But then after that passed, I started getting viral wake up, like you were talking about. And all my clients started, people who have EBV. I have a really, really special kind of the herpes virus that activates inside on my meninges or something, or on my vagus nerve. It's a lot of fun. And I've had it since I was like 19, and it's just gloriously horrible. But I started to get it. And and a lot of clients were saying, I'm having EBV flare-ups and I don't understand. So this was going on at the end of last year. So does this tie into what you're talking about? I mean, because they're saying, no, none of this stuff was here until January, and that was in Seattle.
Oh, absolutely. This just didn't happen overnight. And when we really understand this energy, this plasmic energy that's coming into this universe affects these viruses, because the virus is not living, but it has to be activated. It has to get into the cell so it can replicate DNA and RNA and these protein fragments and disrupt our genetic code and break down. And as it breaks down, you get a symptom. So this has been going on for some time. And so now with the energy pouring in, they're being very much activated because we're so chemically toxic. And so these chemical toxins and the metals are causing it to react. So that's why what you experience is part of the big picture story kind of being played out.
Okay. Yeah,
sense?
yeah, totally. Because it's uncanny how many people, I even posted this on Facebook, and so many replies of people that said, yes, that's me. I'm just having the worst flu, or I just having these activations of outbreaks that I haven't had in years, or, so yeah, it does make sense.
And also, you're going to see a lot of mental activation with anxiety and paranoias and craziness in our thinking. So that's on an emotional level. Then the physical manifestation can be anything from the chronic fatigue to the lung and the mucus coming out, and
Mhm.
just feeling like shit, really.
Yeah, well, that emotional aspect now brings me to the subject of 5G. Where does that play into it all? Now, you mentioned it with the age of Aquarius and air, and it being in the air, traveling through the air. How does it play into it? Is it also a weapon of sorts?
Yeah, when you actually Google these weapons, these biotechnology weapons, there's patents on them. Bill Gates has a patent on one of these viruses or whatever. So
Right,
you
right.
start seeing it, it's like, wow, okay, wait a minute, we've been lied to. All right, so the old story is fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, shame on you, or something like that. You may have screwed that up.
That was so classic George W. Bush, because
Yeah, that was.
he's fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice. No, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
Yeah, and yeah, my dyslexic little mind got the better of me on that one, but
But
it's
you're right. It's like now it's our responsibility.
our responsibility. So they're gonna, they're gonna play the fear in the drama game, and this is why you see all this fear being, you know, it's a cultural norm now. You
Yeah.
can't be close to anyone. We're distancing ourselves from everyone. This
Hmm.
is part of the agenda because what we're leading into, we're going to get into post-humanism because the transgender movement is the gateway drug for the post-humanism thing. And that's where when you have an autistic kid or you have a transgender kid, they're gonna want to put the implant in the autistic kid because they're gonna sell you on the theory that we're gonna make them better. So the implant is going to affect it, but now you have a weapon because the autistic kids, the really severe autistic kids, they lack empathy, and so now you put the chip in there. Big Brother can control that chip with frequencies, and it all comes down to frequencies. And so now we can get into a whole arena where the world's population will be coming down because we're a human resource. We're no longer needed. And so that's why they're getting into, you go to stores and you see machines checking you out. They're phasing us out. And so the population will be dropping over the next 20 to 30 years. But coming back to when we look at this transgender movement, what's the metal that's changing the gender of our species? It's copper. Okay, it's feminizing the entire planet because wherever copper goes, estrogen goes. And so, with all the fake xenoestrogens that we have, that is keeping the copper levels high. And so, when the copper and the estrogen stay high, that's causing a feminization of our planet. And that's
Hmm.
why you see, back in our day, we had the John Waynes and the Rockies and the Arnold Schwarzeneggers. Now we got the Bieber boys, so we feminized the real archetypal masculine energy. And now we're getting into this feminization. And that's why copper is the leading lady in this epoch. So when you think about, did you ever see the famous painting by Botticelli, The Birth of Venus?
Sure.
The iconic Aphrodite, the beautiful Aphrodite standing on the calcium shell. You know where that painting was painted?
I'm trying to, Florence?
Cyprus, the
Okay.
island of Cyprus. You know what Cyprus means in Latin?
No.
Copper.
Copper.
So the birth of Venus is the birth of the feminine. That's why it's associated with copper and Venus, Mars and iron. And so that's the great dialect between Mars and iron and copper and Venus.
Mm.
And that's why we see in astrology, you always see, the Libra Aries connection, because they're the dialects. They're the complete opposites, both cardinal signs. One's a masculine energy, one's a feminine energy. One isn't better than the other, but in the Iron Age, iron has suppressed copper for the last 3,000 years. So as copper comes back, the feminine energy has to come back. But it's going to be dysregulated because it's been subjugated for so long that it'll be confused. And that's why you'll see a lot of copper dysregulation. Copper affects what? Dopamine, all your amines, your dopamine, your histamines, your adrenalines, all that stuff is affected by copper. Copper is associated with fertility. If you don't get your copper in balance, you won't get pregnant. And that's why we're seeing such a decline in pregnancy. And that's why we have fertilization clinics on every street corner in every city, because we can't get pregnant because copper is wreaking havoc on our hormonal system, especially with the estrogens tanking the progesterone. Because if that estrogen doesn't come down, progesterone won't kick in. But it takes the copper, it takes magnesium and zinc to bring the copper down. So now when the copper comes down, the progesterone cycle can kick in. But if the copper doesn't come down, then the progesterone cycle won't kick in. So that's why metals are everything.
So what is the story with bioavailable copper then? So the difference between just having copper, because people can take copper or they can eat things that have copper, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to fix the problem. So
Correct.
How do you make it bioavailable? Like, what is the missing link to just, okay, well, if we're going to have an issue, let me just take less copper or take more copper? Like, that's never the answer, right?
Right, because copper has to be bioavailable. For copper to be, once you eat copper, then it's going to get transported to the liver. In the liver, copper has to be bound to a protein called ceruloplasmin. So ceruloplasmin is dictated via your adrenals have to send a signal to your liver to say, hey, bind the copper, dump the copper, circulate the copper. And so that means the health of the liver is also pertinent, because if we have fatty livers, stagnant livers, fibrosed livers, we're not going to make the ceruloplasmin adequately. And so if the copper is unbound, then she behaves like a toxic metal. So copper has to be bound. Once it's bound, then it can be transported to the cytochrome to make ATP. Then it can be transported to this enzyme or to that enzyme to make hair, skin, nails, that help fix calcium to the bones, to make our melanin, our connective tissues. All connective tissues depend on copper. And so when it's unbound, then it loses its property and it can't do its job. And that's the function of the adrenals and the liver. So that's why we always have to pick up the kidney adrenals, and we always have to clean out the liver. And that's why I said the Bronze Age is 10% tin. Tin has always been the metal of the liver in alchemy. And so that's why you start connecting all these dots and you see, wow, there really is something. When we put the big picture together, then it all starts to make sense of why we have to focus on copper regulation and really mineral balancing, because it's not just the copper. And so that's dependent on the big four: calcium, magnesium, sodium, and potassium. So when I prescribe zinc, it's based on where your sodium and potassium is, because zinc will lower sodium where copper will raise sodium. And so that's why we're always trying to balance that out with mineral balancing. And so we have to get this toxic copper out, because the copper can go into any tissue. Think of all the estrogen receptors we have in our bodies. You know, we have quite a few. It's not just the breast and the ovaries. We have estrogen receptors throughout the whole body. And so copper can go anywhere. And so the first place it likes to accumulate is the liver. That's why one of the greatest strategies for moving toxic copper is doing the coffee enema, so you can remove it through the biliary caniculi. Those biliary caniculi are our drainage system, and most of them are so fibrosed that we're not removing the garbage out. But when we start doing the coffee enemas, we start to get patency in the biliary caniculi that will start removing the metals. It will start removing the viruses, the bacteria, the fungi, And so that's why we always have to put the spotlight on the adrenals and the liver. When I say the adrenals, I'm talking the kidney,
The
adrenal
kidney.
complex. And that's the Jing. You know
Uh-huh.
about Chinese medicine and the Jing?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But say what you're, yeah, say it anyway, because some people don't.
Yeah, so 10,000 years ago, depending on who you study, you know, in Chinese medicine, they had the three treasures, Qi, Jing, and Shen. So they have the most cataloged herbal system in the world. And most of their herbs were adaptogenic herbs to build up the Jing. And the Jing is your kidney adrenal complex. That's how intelligent they were thousands of years ago, knowing that we have to build up our Jing, and our Jing is our kidney adrenal complex. It's a strong connection to our sexual energy. It's a strong connection to controlling the water element, and water is emotions. The most emotional mineral on the periodic table is copper. The one metal that's killed more than any is, think Saturn,
Uh, uh,
lead.
lead.
Lead bullets, lead pipes. So that's why it's the metal of Saturn. That's the Grim Reaper. So that's why it is the perfect correspondence from Saturn and lead. So Saturn, when you think of Saturn, you think carbon, think calcium, think lead. Those are all correspondence to the planet Saturn. And so
Okay.
Saturn isn't good or bad, but we tend to think of Saturn as the great malefic. Without Saturn, we don't have order and structure. When you become too ordered and too structured, you become rigid. And then you start breaking and the calcification starts to happen. So
Wow.
no planet is good or bad.
Right.
It's understanding the energy. And as we go into these conjunctions, we're going into a great conjunction. That's Jupiter and Saturn conjuncting with each other on, during the solar year, but hitting its crescendo on December 21st, 2020. So Jupiter is growth and expansion going against order and structure. Order and structure, governments and banking and stuff like that. All that's going to be confronted. And there's going to be some Pluto energy in that. And Pluto is the underworld. It's the destroyer. So there's going to be some fascinating things, but at the end of the day, we have to balance out these minerals. That's why I'm going blue in the face saying we have to do mineral balancing and detoxification so we can get our pineal gland in alignment to receive the download so our DNA can really expand to evolve. And that's what we're here
to
to
make
evolve.
to make it beyond this. So, okay, let's go back to, okay, you know who Morley Robbins is?
Of course I do.
Of course. So tell me where, because he definitely maligns iron in many ways, and you're right, and he says this too. But we need it. It's important. We need all of these metals in our body. We just need the balance. But the way you just described copper is really similar to the way he describes iron as being this, like, it needs to be reined in, it needs to be wrangled, it needs to be handled, it needs to be balanced, it needs to be detoxed, it needs to be bound, it needs to, all these things sound very, very much like iron.
Absolutely. Iron and copper are very simple. I mean, not very simple. They're very complex, but they're classic energies of iron is Mars and copper is Venus. It's that dialect. So Mars is the warrior energy. When you become anemic, you become the doormat to life. You get stepped on, you lose your adrenal reserves to speak your mind, to fight the good fight. So we need that martial spiritual energy of Mars. So I said Mars is on Tuesday. What do we do on Tuesdays? Vote on Tuesdays, presidential speeches on Tuesdays, declarations of war on Tuesday, 9/11 on Tuesday, because it's the day of war. And so iron in our body, to churn the iron is, when it's in the ferrous form, Fe2, it's going to oxidize everything. So you just can't have Fe2 going into the blood. It will oxidize and destroy everything. So you have to transport iron through ceruloplasmin, you need to convert Fe2 to Fe3. To do that, you need copper. Copper is responsible for that conversion. So then Fe3 iron can get into transferrin. So transferrin can take it to the myoglobin, the hemoglobin, to take it to the cytochrome, take it to wherever it needs to go. And that's the importance. That's why the feminine energy is a little bit more important than the masculine energy, because the feminine energy always bursts life. And so we need to respect that. Even in genetics, we know that women have the X chromosome. The X chromosome is more powerful than the Y chromosome because they have X chromosomes that we don't even really know about in the brain, how it's really churning things on in the brain. Why do you think in pornography they use triple X's? Because they're putting the explanation on the feminine chromosome. So this is the brainwashing and the manipulation that's been going on to keep us in our lower chakra center where we won't be able to move the energy through the 7 chakra system.
Wow. Wow. It's also, I think that made me think of estrogen and how estrogen in its like nano form is like, you know, so much more potent than its equivalent progesterone in that same nanogram or whatever it is. Like, it's like kryptonite, like you know, it's just outweighs progesterone in every way. And it's so easy to have tiny bits of estrogen and still be estrogen dominant and have progesterone. You can just pile on progesterone, you know, cream or whatever, and still have a really hard time balancing out that estrogen because it's so potent and powerful, which is very feminine, right?
It's the most feminine hormone, and that's why copper and estrogen and Venus are all connected, and that connects to Botticelli's Birth of Venus.
Yeah.
So it really all starts to connect, but with estrogen, you know, understanding how copper changes, you know, when you look at it, we're mostly carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. So if you add up those elements on the periodic table, that's 22. That's a catch 22 as in 22 chromosomes. The 23rd chromosome is the sex chromosome. So that catch 22 of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen are influenced by the 3%, which is the metals. 75% of your periodic table is the metals. Then you got the non-metals, and then you got metalloids that kind of in the gray area. They can look like a metal, smell like a metal, like aluminum is a metalloid, but it's not really a metal because it's got a lot of properties of metals, but it's not exactly a metal. It's what we call a metalloid.
And are all minerals metals?
No, like fluorine or iodine it's a halogen, so it's not classically a metal, it's a halogen.
Okay.
Boron is a metalloid, so it's not quite a metal. So there's some gray area in that, but most of the minerals are metals. And so, and so you look at, you know, I'm going to have to do a lecture on the periodic table to show why they're in their certain places and why, you know.
I'd like to sign up for that now, please.
When you look at your periodic table, you got 7 horizontal rows. That's no coincidence that you got 7 horizontal rows, because that's the magic number that birthed life to everything. Wow. And then you're going to see the 3-4 harmonics there. You're going to see where the 3 metals of currency since the beginning of time, we'll say bronze, which is copper, silver, and gold. They sit right under each other because they have the same malleable properties. They're shiny, they're lustrous, they have durability, they can be you know, molded into coinage. So we start to see, why are they in the same, you know, vertical column? Because of their qualities are very similar. And that's why the 3 oldest metals since the beginning of time is copper, gold, and silver. And silver is the moon. Nothing reflects like the moon. And so it's a very powerful energy. And so the periodic table is just amazing when we look at it from an alchemical point of view. And we don't just get stuck in the bean counting of looking at it from, you know, a high chemistry point of view, which is important, but you need to add the alchemy to really make sense of that periodic table, because it's a beautiful thing. And it's all, you know, the chemical secret to life is the movement of electrons. And so how these electrons move change the chemistry. And so when we have too much copper, we're changing the chemistry of the estrogen, where we're going to hydroxylate the estrogen, turn a normal age-related estrogen into a carcinogen. And that's because the copper is changing the structure, the molecule of estrogen, because it's very attractive. And copper's always been the harlot of the metals. She doesn't like to be single, unbound, and free. She needs to be in a relationship. So she wants to be bound. If she's not bound to the right thing, she'll find something to bind to. And that's where she becomes very oxidative.
Oh, that hussy. So I have always said, because of Dr. Robert Marshall, my mentor, he taught me, he doesn't like to isolate minerals. He doesn't like to give somebody one mineral, because he says in nature, that's not how we would consume that mineral. You'll never find a piece of food that has one nutrient in it. It's going to have synergistic nutrients in it. And that's how he feels like, that's why all of his products, most of his products are all these synergistic herbal components and complexes and whatnot. So how do you feel about that? You said you do recommend just zinc to somebody. And is that in the form of a zinc supplement? How do you feel about that notion?
Yeah, I mean, I love Premier Research Labs. I think they have some of the best stuff, but there's a reason why he died a little too early.
He worked too hard.
He worked too hard, but some of his strategies weren't. How do you say you should get selenium? Eat some
like 3 Brazil nuts a day.
Okay. How do we know the soil where those Brazilian nuts are grown actually have selenium in it? We don't. Our soil, because of
he would say muscle test it.
And that's also good. I would say let's do a mineral profile, because when we do a mineral profile, now we have, because that's the mineral wheel. That mineral wheel is the same wheel in the sky, and so it's the zodiac, based in mineral form. So minerals tell us about the planets. Minerals tell us about the energetics of us. So cosmology affects psychology, affects physiology. So as above, so below. So instead of just eating 3 Brazilian nuts, if I see low selenium, you better believe that I'm going to give you selenium, especially when we know we're dealing with thyroid stuff, detoxification stuff. We got to get that selenium on board, because selenium is going to deal with what? Mercury, and it's going to deal with cadmium and a lot of heavy metals and arsenic. And so when we look at the selenium levels, now we have a real blueprint to say, boy, I'm deficient. I can see it on my hair test. I need to get that selenium into me. So I want to come in with selenium. I want to come in with, if I see high sodium compared to potassium, I have to lower that sodium, because when you have that sodium potassium too high, that's inflammation, because sodium is the most volatile metal on the periodic table.
Really?
Think of sodium as, when you think of sodium, what comes to mind? Hopefully the ocean does.
Salt. Yes. Yeah.
Water.
Right.
Okay. So sodium is the ocean. The oceans can be calm calm, and then on a dime, they can become the most violent things. That's how sodium behaves in your body. So when you have high sodium, you have inflammation, you have anger, you could become belligerent, you have a knee-jerk reaction to everything, because it's so volatile. So when we see that
you just described me. Just kidding.
You're the least of that.
I've managed good, but no, that is interesting. Okay.
So we have to bring the sodium down, because it is volatile, because sodium is associated with aldosterone. Aldosterone is an inflammatory hormone, where to put out the fire of inflammation, you need cortisol, the most potent anti-inflammatory hormone. That's a potassium response, where sodium is an aldosterone response. And we have that high sodium, very volatile. We have to bring it down. The great mineral that does it, zinc, lowers sodium. So when I see that discrepancy, a high ratio, anytime you see that sodium potassium ratio above a 6-to-1, we know you're in inflammation. We know you're going to have a quick knee-jerk reflex. We know you're going to have anger. We know you're going to have inflammation in the body. So that's why zinc helps to bring down the sodium. But let's say you have low sodium and too much potassium. That's a sodium-potassium inversion. So that has to be corrected because a low sodium-potassium ratio below a 2.5, when you're below a 2, you're in chronic inflammation. You're in premature aging. And so now we have to raise the sodium, and that's where we have to give copper to help raise the sodium. We may have to give manganese to help raise the sodium. That's the beautiful gist of mineral balancing. So we're not doing replacement therapy. We're focusing on the big four: calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium. Those four minerals are responsible for every electrical conduit in our body, whether it's the brain, the heart, the muscles, whatever. Every conduit happens because of the big four. And that's why mineral balancing is working on the big four. So we use the transitional metals to help balance those out. And how we prescribe that is based on sodium and potassium.
So you're saying, let me simplify your answer for my audience. So you're saying, so you use the hair mineral analysis test to figure out what somebody's mineral metal load is in the body, minerals in the body, and then from that you prescribe or you suggest of the four to try to bring those four big ones into balance. So using zinc and using selenium for you is really crucial because your take is you're not just isolating this mineral. You're actually giving this mineral because it's needed in order to bring balance to the ones that are out of balance. I don't know if I did that.
You said that perfectly.
Okay, good.
So again, I'm not doing replacement therapy. Sometimes I am, but most of the time it's for the big four. So again, like if I see that high sodium, I have to lower sodium. That's where I may come in with 50 milligrams of zinc, 60 milligrams of zinc. I may have to work you up to 60 to 70 milligrams, but I'm going to lower that sodium by giving you zinc. So zinc is a higher octave of Mars. It's a higher octave of Jupiter. It's a higher octave of Uranus. Zinc is the crowning achievement of mankind because it developed the neocortex. Without zinc, the neocortex does not develop. So we see when a sperm hits the egg, that's called the zinc spark. So it sparks, it actually lights up.
Oh, yeah.
So it's very interesting how we see these metals have energies to them. And so we're encapsulating the energetics by looking at a hair tissue to see, we see a belligerent pattern. We see a what we call a millennial pattern, the burnouts that just want everything.
They're in the entitled.
The entitled. So we start to see these patterns psychologically, physically. And again, we don't need to peel the onion and tell people that you have a millennial pattern. What we have to do is say, well, you're an adrenal burnout. We have to pick up your adrenals. So we have to work with them. And we also come in with homeopathic remedies to understand the energetics behind some of these things. And that's a whole other area that is one of the most beautiful sciences of all is homeopathy. So I love that science, and I use that with mineral balancing. So it's a great 1-2 punch, because when you start dumping a metal, you'll get a symptom. It's called an aggravation. So that's where we come in with a homeopathic remedy to help neutralize the aggravation from dumping a metal.
Okay. Now, what about, being healthy gut girl, I'm always like, it's the root, you got to get to the gut. So it sounds to me like the mineral balance is even before that. It underlines even gut health, because gut health has to function because these minerals have to be in balance. Like, talk about gut health.
Absolutely. One of the things that I loved about Medici was how he explained things to us. Yeah. Remember him explaining hydrochloric acid, how important HCl is?
Yep.
To make HCl, if you don't have zinc, you don't make HCl, okay? So that's the importance of hydrochloric acid and the zinc connection. Without zinc, without adequate zinc, you don't make adequate levels of hydrochloric acid. To make all your digestive juices, your amylase, your lipase, your proteases, all your digestive juices depend on zinc. So that's the importance of zinc with digestion. You are lined with zinc fingers from the mouth to the anus. And And every fluid in your body has zinc in it. So that's the protective mechanism in our eyes, in our nose, on our tongue, in our digestive tract. And so zinc becomes the spiritual warrior because it's always protecting us. It will
Ooh.
always sacrifice itself for the greater good. So when I see zinc going down, I actually get excited because that's telling me that the toxic metal, maybe mercury, is coming out. Now zinc is getting in to drive the enzyme, and you may see phosphorus going down because you need energy, ATP, that's the phosphorus, that's
Mm-hmm.
that high yielding energy. So when the zinc enzyme gets into the cell, now you need energy to drive it. And so you may see phosphorus and zinc going down, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because to me, it's telling me, well, the zinc is starting to be utilized, and it's revealing your true zinc deficiency.
Wow. It plays a role in progesterone manufacturing too, doesn't it? Zinc is.
Absolutely. So when you look at the hormonal pathway, you'll see zinc going from, pregnenolone all the way to progesterone. You'll see zinc show up a gazillion times in the steroidal pathways. You'll see B3 show up quite frequently. You'll see zinc showing up almost always in these steroidal pathways. And even for neurotransmitters, when we look at these autistic kids, they have too much dopamine. Dopamine has to be converted into epinephrine. The enzyme that breaks the dopamine down is called the beta dopamine hydroxylase enzyme. That's a copper dependent enzyme. When you have too much biounavailable copper and too little zinc, that enzyme, that copper enzyme won't work. And then you have too much dopamine. Too much dopamine becomes very reactive to the brain, and that's your wired but tired. That's your craziness. That's your paranoia. That's your I can't think. I can't
Wow,
concentrate.
you just described me again. um, so the thing that's tempting to do, just as I did, is to say, "Oh, that's me. I have that. Oh, and then I need more copper. Oh, I'm going to buy this. I don't know, copper chelate from Standard Process and just take it." Like, this is dangerous, wouldn't you say? Like, it's important to really understand, to have somebody like yourself to be able to do one of these mineral analysis tests, and not just do it off the test, but then have someone who understands how to incorporate that into a protocol, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you have to have a trained eye to look at this, because when I'm looking at a hair test, I'm looking at it from many, many levels. I'm seeing the psychology, the physiology, I'm seeing the astrology. So I get a lot from a hair test. But we never just want to focus on, oh, I have low manganese, so I give you manganese. That doesn't work. That's replacement therapy. We want to get away from that paradigm. We want to do balancing. Everything in life is about the yin and yang, the night and the day. It's about balance. You don't want to have too much, positive or negative. You want to have that balance, and that's what mineral balancing is about. That's why you need a trained eye to help guide patients through this process, because all of a sudden they may dump a metal and they think they're dying, and I'm saying, well, you're
Yeah.
dumping a metal and we can start to see your copper going off the top shelf. Going through a copper dump can be traumatic, but if you know you're going through it, you're not dying, you're going to get through it. So that's where coaching and mentorship and guidance becomes critical on a mineral balancing program, because we're shaking chemistry up, we're
Mm-hmm.
shaking up physiology, and that can be very shocking to the body.
Yeah.
So that's why you do want guidance on the
Right.
healing journey.
I forgot to ask the other gut question. So what about the microbes in the gut? So, I'm a big fan of that 3 to 5 pounds of bacteria that live in our guts. How do the gut, like, can you speak on anything to do with the relationship of them and mineral balance and microbes?
Sure. It's kind of funny when you look at a pathological microbe, such as Clostridium, and you look at good bacteria, all our good bacteria, they all want the resources, the minerals, okay? Because for a bad guy to grow and expand, it needs the minerals. So it's going to go after iron. So iron will go into hiding. And that's why you may see ferritin going high when you have a bacterial infection, because you don't want to feed the bacteria. So it goes into hiding. Meanwhile, your cells don't get the iron, so you become anemic, weak, and basically bedridden. And that's the chronicity. So chronicity, what we see, all these infections that we have weaken the vital force over time, where we just can't be what we were meant to be. And so we're always depleted, we're always fatigued, we're always like, oh, I want to do this, but I don't have energy. You don't have energy because you don't have iron, because iron drives that electron transport chain. Iron will show up in 2 of the Krebs cycle pathways, and you'll have in the electron transport chain, you have iron sulfur clusters that are moving the electrons all the way to the end game to hit the phosphate. And then that phosphate binds to the triphosphate, the ATP. Then the ATP has to be bound to what for it to work? You need a magnesium molecule bound to ATP. And if you don't bind the magnesium to the ATP, that ATP is useless.
Wow.
That
So
should
Matt,
be in every physiology book. And that's coming from Boyd Haley, PhD of Kentucky University, explaining the magnesium ATP connection. Not once in chiropractic school was I ever schooled on magnesium. They never mentioned it. Without magnesium, ATP doesn't work.
wow.
That's so important. Copper can bully out the magnesium too, because copper can block magnesium, copper blocks zinc, copper can block many of the nutrient minerals because it's very sticky in its quality.
Because it's a hussy.
It is, and plus it's a +1, +2, so its valency can be very similar to any +1 or +2 mineral. +1 minerals are calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, +2 minerals such as zinc. So that's why you see the valency of these minerals, and it tells us how they through molecular mimicry, they are very similar, but still very different.
Wow. So someone might hear that and say, once again, oh, I better take more iron. And of course, that was a big mistake for me throughout my whole life. Again, we need to find out what's going on with your iron. You might get a test done, and it might say that your iron is quite low, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have available iron that you're using. And this is a big mistake that I think a lot of doctors make when they look at a blood lab, and see that your iron is low, and they're like, give her iron. Meanwhile, you're basically poisoning yourself with the iron.
Absolutely. Now, here's a concept I need people to understand. Biochemistry happens in the cells, not the blood. Okay? So blood is important.
Said.
Blood is important. It's a transport medium. It tells us about leukemias, anemias, and things like that. And so we want to look at blood, but biochemistry happens in the cells, not the blood. So when they're doing a blood test and they're looking at your electrolytes, 99% of the potassium is intracellular. 99% of the magnesium is intracellular. So when they're doing a blood test, they're looking at the 1%. I'm looking at the 99% because that's where biochemistry happens, in the cell, not the blood. That's why hair testing gives us a window into your biochemistry like no other test. And it is the greatest predictor of health trends. So when we see low sodium, low potassium, that's chronic infections. That can lead to cancer, to diabetes, to neurodegenerative disease. It may take 10 years, 20 years for one of those bad diseases to develop, but if you don't fix that low sodium, low potassium, you will in the end get something you don't want.
So with the hair, some basic questions about hair mineral analysis testing. So why does it show up in the hair? I mean, what's up with that?
It's an excretory organ, just like, it's going to come out through the urine, it's going to come out through the sweat, it's going to come out through the stool, it's going to come out through our breath. And so the hair is a great depository as an excretory for the minerals. And so we can really see mineral patterns because there's distinct patterns in how it comes out. That's how we were able to see how some of these old, like
a mummy or something.
How Napoleon died of arsenic poisoning, and how Mozart had, I forgot which poisoning, but
right.
They, so they take a strand of hair can put someone in jail.
Right, exactly, forever.
So we see distinct patterns that happen. And what we want to do is not look at one hair test. We want to do serial hair tissue analyses. So like every 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, we want to see the pattern, because you can go from slow oxidation, start dumping a metal. As you dump a metal, that aggravates the kidneys, causes sodium and potassium to spike. Now you're in fast oxidation, and that can change in 4 months. Now we have to redo the program, and to redo the program, we need a new hair sample. So that's why we want to do serial hair tissue analyses like every 4 or 6 months.
Because that's where you're getting the hair, the new growth, wherever that may be on your body, the new growth. You're not going to want to take hair from the bottom of your, like my hair's so long.
As close to the scalp as possible, and you always want to clip it in the same spot, as close to the same spot as possible.
Each time, okay.
Each time. So you're trying to kind of just be very cognitive of where you're clipping your hair.
Yeah.
I don't do the hair. My wife does the hair cuts in my office.
Okay.
But that's a good concept, because you can get varying mineral patterns based on where the hair is coming out. So you always want to go for the same place all the time, so you're consistent.
Mm-hmm. So as a young baby and young girl, I had a lot of metal exposure, a lot. I had really high mercury levels, and just from being overly vaccinated. I was a military brat, so we were always traveling, so they love just vaccinating you just because you're getting on a plane. And then I also had some stuff I was born with that was challenging, and then I also had, I was put on tetracycline at a really young age. So I had bacterial meningitis. And so I had, like, it decalcified my teeth basically. And I had like really bad baby teeth. They would just come out. Like, I'd bite into an apple and a tooth would just fall out of my face. And so they would put crowns on my teeth, like metal crowns. I had like all mercury fillings and teeth. It was crazy. So when so I basically had this metal issue, but I had this theory because my hair would grow like Rapunzel and my fingernails are so strong. It's unbelievable. Like, they grow in a matter of a week. I have to cut them because they're just so long. And I had this theory that it's my body getting rid of all that metal. Is that possible? That's just a personal question.
That's a good question. I gotta ponder on that, because there is some truth to that.
Mm-hmm.
I have to think about it. I don't have a distinct answer for that, but there is something there.
Okay. Good.
Metal, when you look at copper, it's for all your connective tissue. It's skin, hair, nails. Think copper. Yeah. So Venus is the planet of beauty and love and sex and relationships. Mm-hmm. And so when copper is dysregulated, hormones, the beauty stuff. With me, I have a lot of beauty marks. I have a lot of moles. That's because of copper. That's because the melanin it does didn't process in my body. So I was born copper toxic. And
wow.
So I didn't get the good looks.
What happened? Now you did. You took some copper?
So the Venus energy really it was my gift and my curse. So I was, I had cavities in every tooth. I break every bone in my body.
Wow.
I was really weak. I was sick for the first 25 years of my life.
Yeah.
And I knew that my mom was copper toxic because she had varicosities of the worst type. She had periods from hell. And then eventually, if you don't deal with the copper, its end game will be either cancer or the neurodegenerative brain disease. It's either too much apoptosis or apoptosis doesn't work at all. Mm. And so it'll either express itself as that. So I knew that my mom was going to get the Alzheimer's, and I just knew that she was so copper toxic. So in utero, I got all my mom's copper.
Wow.
And I was played with it my whole life, my ADD, dyslexia. I mean, people thought I was stupid.
Wow.
I had one teacher said, "Your kid's a good kid." He was talking to my mom, but he's not college material. And my mom started crying and everything. But I knew he was right, because I knew that I was off. And I couldn't figure out why I was off, but I said, I'm going to spend my entire life figuring out why I'm a mess. And so that's why I got into healing and medicine, because I'm going to figure it out. And it was finally when I came to the metals, that's when I knew where my issues were.
Wow.
So I've been detoxing copper, and I still have high copper. I'll lower it down, and then I'll have another copper dump. I am just so loaded with it. But again, it's my gift and my curse.
Yeah, I love that because I think a lot of people like us have this story of being really, really sick and, plagued with all kinds of things as young children. And then you grow up and you say, I've got to fix this. I cannot live like this. I mean, I'm like 25 years old. I got to live another 25 years like this. Somebody do something. And so I think you're right. It's a blessing and it's a curse. It's very, very cool. So, God, I could talk to you for a very long time. I want to ask you about the astrology aspect. When did you realize that those were tied in, or were you always interested in astrology? Because look, I know a lot of astrologists, a lot of people that practice astrology, and I have never heard anybody talk like you.
Yeah, I was confused by astrology because just looking at the numbering system, when you think of, our Western astrology, it's been hijacked.
Mm-hmm.
October is the 10th month, but what is Oct? If you go to the octagon, that's 8.
8.
Okay. September is 7, yet it's the 9th month. December is a decimal, that's 10. When you run the decathlon, it's 10 events.
Yeah.
So I knew our astrology was off. So I had to study Vedic astrology, sidereal astrology, Western astrology, and kind of just take the best from what these offered. And then I started formulating my own thoughts on this because, most of the astrology we're taught belongs where? It's in the funny papers where it belongs because most of it is garbage. And so
you said funny papers. You just dated yourself. All the young listeners are like, what's a funny paper?
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Of course.
So anyway. Astrology is, that's the, it's the royal science. And so it's uncorrupted. If we look at it and start to understand how important this astrological energies are. And so we've been brainwashed. Astrology's been hijacked. The church has condemned it, and so many things have attacked it. But the true beauty of astrology is it's uncorruptible, and it's always been. It's the great sky clock in the universe that determines cycles of time. When we go through golden ages, we're at peace. We're at our divine perfect essence in the golden age. We are so far removed from the golden age, but we're just entering the bronze age, so that's a good sign. But there's going to be a lot of dysregulation in this whenever you go from one age to another. The Piscean age, that was the biblical flood. That was 3,000 years ago. Now as we enter this new age, look at the stuff that's happened in 2020. I was telling people, I said, 2020 will be the craziest year you will ever live. And I was saying that before the new year.
Right.
So I'm on record telling everyone this, and they're thinking, oh, he drank the Kool-Aid, he's sniffing McDonald's.
He's got his tinfoil hat on.
Yeah, and I've been saying that it's so powerful when we understand this above-below connection, because every mineral comes from where? From big bangs to birth of stars, death of stars, nebulas. Those are the minerals that energize the entire planet, that bring life to everything. And so when you look at what mineral encapsulates the sun. So if I was to say to you, what mineral do you think is the real sun mineral?
Iron?
That's Mars. Mars is the red planet. What makes your blood red is iron. So the red planet is the war planet.
Okay, so, I won't forget that now. Okay. What? And it couldn't be the other ones you mentioned.
Think plants, photosynthesis.
Right.
The essence of the sun. So in the porphyrin ring of your blood is iron. In you, the porphyrin ring of a plant to make the chlorophyll, it's magnesium.
Oh,
magnesium is the quintessence of the sun.
Of the sun, of course. Magnesium, like a match, right? Like the
It's the magnetic, Magdalene, majestic, magnificent, magical energy.
Oh my God!
It's the magnetic energy. So the sun has the masculine energy, which is gold. Then it's got the feminine energy, which is magnesium, and then the neutral energy is hydrogen. So carbon is earth, hydrogen is fire, water is oxygen, nitrogen is air. that's how they used to do it in the ancient world. We complicated things. And so when we look at it from a simplistic point of view, the four elements, fire, water, air, earth, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, then we start to make sense of how we have to build up these elements in us. And to do that, now here's another thing about magnesium. If I was to say to you, what number is magnesium on the periodic table?
No idea.
The sun has to go through how many houses?
12.
12. Magnesium is number 12 on the periodic table.
What? Oh gosh, I stopped writing because I can't keep up. I'm like, I have my notes, like 3 pages.
I'm working on my book. I've been really trying to get my book, but I don't have enough time to sit down and write. But plus I'm not a good writer, but it takes
well, I don't know. Okay, so what about classes? Do you teach webinars and classes?
I don't. I should, but I don't. I'm always teaching my patients. I mean, I'm lecturing at nauseum about this to my patients, and they're starting to get it. They're starting to understand the bigger picture. But you always have to meet people where they're at, you know. So I don't want to sit there and convince them of astrology is the real deal, or convince them that, wait a minute, there's some secret societies going on.
Right.
You know, they may not be ready to hear that.
See, that's the difference between, one of the differences between you and Dr. Marshall. He didn't have a filter. He didn't care. He didn't meet you where you were. He's like, listen, let's talk about the aliens. All right. That's what we're going to do. And he's telling this to grandma, right? He's like, listen. So I get that, and that's important, and it's a really good quality of a practitioner is to meet people where they are. I want to be where you are, so I think I need to hire you, first of all, to go over my mineral labs and to do new ones and everything. I'm blown away by this. And so how can people reach you? I'll put all this in the show notes, but I really want people to,
you know, they all have to go through my wife.
Okay, good.
So my wife is the screener. So I can talk, and she says, your time is precious. So she does all the hardball stuff. She screens out the patient. So you can reach me at, my web, Back to Natural Health.
Okay, cool. And it'll be in the show notes.
Right. So at Back to Natural Health, and you fill out the health intake form. Once my wife gets the health intake form, she calls you, and then she'll have a discussion with you explaining our practice. And then if she feels that there's a fit, then she'll schedule an appointment for me to have a consult with you. And then after we have a consult, then I put together a care plan saying, based on your medical history, based on your current symptoms, based on, you know, as I profile you, these are the labs I need to run. So I'll usually run a hair tissue on everyone, but I also may run an organic acid test. I may run a GI map test. I may have to run a hormonal test. We're dealing with some neurotransmitter. I have to run a neurotransmitter test, but I base that on my interview when I'm profiling you. Because I'm profiling you astrologically, physiologically, biochemically, every which way I'm profiling. So I'm looking into you. I want to find your weak links, your strengths, because my goal is to pick you up, to get your vital force heading in the right direction.
Wow.
What do I heal? I heal nothing. Healing's between you and God. All I'm doing is cutting through the bullshit and getting you on the right path, and understanding how important the detox pathways are, and how important mineralization is, and understanding what we're putting into our body, what we're thinking, what we're breathing. And that's what I mean when I say master the air element. It's not just breathing good air, it's connection to universal spirit.
You know, that's really beautiful what you just said, because I think that one of the things that's so frustrating about the health industry and wellness industry, mostly wellness industry, is it's hard to know where to go. Like you go to one practitioner and you just feel everything feels so scattered and compartmentalized and, you know, disjointed. And one of the things that I loved about Dr. Marshall and Dr. Medici is there's this plan. You kind of get this bird's eye view of what's going on with your body, and then you get to it. And that to me is, it's like getting a compass with your map. All of a sudden, you've got this you've got this plan, and it makes sense, you know, and I love that. And yeah, the fact that we're the healers, right? You are the facilitator. You're facilitating the healing in the body for us to, you know, like you said, it was I don't know why I'm trying to say it again. You said it perfectly. So, um, uh, well, okay. Well, I'm going to have you back because I want to go into the whole other aspect again in regards to, you know, implants, aliens, 5G. Like, I want to go down that path further, but I'm really glad we touched on the biochemistry here and balancing minerals and what that really means. So I hope I can have you back.
Absolutely. And I know I was all over the place. I didn't explain everything because we were just shooting from the hip. And so maybe we'll do some, like, you know, you'll give me some real questions so I can be really prepared, because this is all top of the head stuff.
But it's so good. I have no problem with this. This is easily already one of my favorite podcasts. So do not judge yourself about how you delivered. It was beautiful. My listeners expect this from me. They want me to be super casual with people who are brilliant. So I think that it was perfect. I just want to go deeper. That's all.
And I would love to, because I still have a lot of stuff that I'm actually writing an article on the genetic engineering of viruses. I'm getting deep down the rabbit hole into that.
Oh,
and
gosh.
that's a fascinating thing, because, and this is why when they come in with these vaccines, there's going to be viruses in them.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they're going to be set off through these frequencies, through these chemicals, and then they're going to provoke a lot of bad symptoms in us. So I'm writing an article on that, and I'll get my thoughts really clear on that. Right now, I'm scattered.
Okay, well, we're going to do that soon, I hope. So we'll talk about that when we close up here. But I just want to thank you so much. And I'm so glad or you stumbled upon me, and then I stumbled upon you, and then here we are.
You interviewed my favorite guys. Like,
yeah.
I've been following Medici for years. I've listened to every one of his podcasts.
Did you hear last Saturday's about the coronavirus?
That's the one I haven't listened to yet.
It's great.
Everything right now is speeding up. I mean, time is going so quickly because
it is.
The flow of energy is Schumann frequencies are speeding up.
Yeah.
And so it's an amazing time we live in.
It is. It's exciting. It's scary, and it's exciting. So yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure being here, and I look forward to our next hookup.
Awesome.